I'm pretty confident that this was one of the worst and weirdest coaching runs in history. I was probably the most excited man when Eddie Jones was announced as Wallabies coach. Not that I didn't like Dave Rennie, but Eddie Jones had that proven track record and felt like somebody who could really get a big lift from the Wallabies in the shortest period of time. After all, Eddie's built this legacy of a guy who can get some really good short-term results. Although he was seen as a bit of a traitor for coaching other international sides, especially the Poms, us Aussie fans still admired his clear passion for the Wallabies being good. The viral confrontation of him being called a traitor and his clear emotional response is what led us diehard Wallabies fans to believe that he could actually be our saviour for the Rugby World Cup. It was a bit of a strange decision at the time to employ Eddie, because even though Dave Rennie's winning percentage was lacking, we were knocking on the door of some of the best countries in the world. We had just secured wins over Scotland and Wales and had ridiculously close losses to the All Blacks, France, Italy and Ireland. While ideally it would have been great for the Wallabies to win all of these games, at least they were in every contest. Meanwhile, Eddie was coming off a horrendous run with England. You know, it's a bit of a telling sign when players and fans are keen to see the back end of a coach. Although his reputation was still quite solid. He was known as the guy who supercharged the Cherry Blossoms World Cup campaign in 2015, including that shock win over the Springboks while playing edge-of-your-seat rugby. He then moved on to become England's head coach. He claimed the 2016 Six Nations, achieved their first Grand Slam in 13 years, and went on an 18-game winning streak. A very impressive coaching run, and he eventually went to take England onto the World Cup final in which they lost to the Springboks. His winning percentage during this time was elite. The wheels eventually fell off, but he had acquired a pretty impressive list of accolades. After being announced as Wallabies coach in January, you would expect his first few months in charge to be masterminding the Wallabies ambush for the Rugby World Cup. Instead though, in true Eddie form, he entered with a real sense of bravado. Engaging in verbal jousts with the media, stirring up cross-code wars with Rugby League, and basically saying anything he could to get rugby a headline. There was never a boring moment, and while it was hilarious at the time, the clowning would come back to bite him later on. July would approach and Wallabies fans would finally get to see the Eddie Jones effect. Expecting a lift in performance, a real surge for the Rugby Championship, but fuck me. We didn't win a single game. Most of the Rugby Championship was a tough watch, annihilated by the Springboks and All Blacks, losing to Argentina in the dying minutes. Let's be honest, belief of fans at this point was diminishing by the day. The final bit of hope for every fan was a strong World Cup squad being announced. Instead though, fans were met with that accidental pregnancy kind of news. The squad didn't make sense, and no matter who analysed it, nobody could work out what Eddie was doing. Leaving out Michael Hooper, every squad has that old dog in it, and he had been the Wallabies captain for the better part of the last decade. Fans were adamant a revitalised Hooper after some time off could have a huge impact for the Wallabies. Quade Cooper also left out. Both of these guys have that really high ceiling, and us fans kind of expected Eddie to try and get this out of them, but he didn't even try. The biggest head scratcher was his decision to name 2 fly halves in the squad, with less than 4 international caps at the time. Nothing made sense, and in my opinion, Eddie Jones didn't want to build on the work of Dave Rennie. He wanted the entire Wallabies World Cup campaign to be his own creation. The Wallabies squad made headlines for all the wrong reasons, and after all the chirping with the media in the lead up to the World Cup, reporters were pretty happy to antagonise the Wallabies coach. It was fun seeing Eddie Jones rip into journalists and barb with the media, but I think he forgot just how quickly they can leak information or push a false narrative, and he was making himself a prime target. The entire World Cup was an absolute disaster for 2 reasons. Right as it kicked off, it would be leaked that he applied and interviewed for the head coaching job of Japan. An action that would contradict all his words leading up to the World Cup. And results-wise, he led the Wallabies into their worst World Cup campaign in history.
Oi, so you blokes think you can win the whole thing?
Mate, we're not going to France for the croissants.
That boy's a liar. The Wallabies were frontrunners to make it to the knockout stages, after drawing a relatively easy pool, all things considered. After an unconvincing win over Georgia, a loss to Fiji, a thumping at the hands of Wales, and then an uninspiring win over Portugal, the circus was officially over. Following the disaster World Cup campaign, Eddie would confirm he's 100% committed to the Wallabies until the next World Cup, and strongly denied ever interviewing for the Japan coaching job. And while we won't know whether he was telling the truth or not, Just 12 days later, after reassuring everyone of his commitment to the Wallabies, he would announce he's not far from finalising an exit deal. He went on record saying the reasoning behind his departure was Rugby Australia have no strategy and no money, which is probably true, but that doesn't deny the fact that this was one of the worst and weirdest coaching runs in history. And once all the dust had settled, Eddie Jones was announced as the new international coach of Japan. Is his coaching career cooked? Let me know what you think.